Welcome to Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yan. I'm ordinarily the comic half, usually briefing Nat. And Nat is...
I am the sans half, usually receiving Yen's brief. And today I will still be receiving, as will Yen, because once again, we have another very special guest on the show. I am very, very thrilled to welcome onto Comic Sans a comedy writer who works across TV, film, podcast, YouTube, and of course, comics. He is the co-writer of the 2-Eisner-nominated graphic novel Bubble, based off a scripted comedy podcast by the same name that he also wrote. And his second graphic novel, Youth Group, which we are going to get into talk about multiple times in this episode, is available now from First Second Books. And most importantly to me, he makes semi-regular appearances on the hit YouTube show Good Mythical Morning as a variety of characters, including, but not limited to, Cotton Candy Randy, Doomsday Prepper Ezekiel Jeremiah Elijah Malachi III, and an unnamed man whose wife left him for a transformer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jordan Morris.
Hello. What a thorough recounting of my resume. That's it. You got them all. All the important stuff. Thank you.
I'm going to ask, what's everybody enjoying lately? Yeah, tell us, Nat. What's a piece of media you've been enjoying lately?
So something I've been enjoying recently, and this is not new by any means, but the soundtrack or the cast recording of The Last 5 Years by Jason Robert Brown a lot. I think probably in light of the fact that, they recently announced a Broadway staging of it starring Adrian Warren and Nick Jonas. No comment on that. But yeah, so I've been listening to that a bunch. I mean, also because shameless plug, Yen and I are writing a musical currently. So that's been a big source of inspiration for us. I love that soundtrack so much. Yen?
Well, actually, mine's a little bit related. I've been reading this manga called Bakuman by the creators of Death Note. So it's Oba and Obata, I believe are their names. It's about these two 17-year-old kids who decide they want to get published in Shonen Jump, which is the big manga magazine for young boys. And it just follows their trials and tribulations as they work through rivals. And it's really strange because it's structured like a little bit like an action shonen. So they have like battles with people, but they're all just drawing. It's one of the few shonen manga I've read in which like there's not a single action scene for like 6 chapters in a row. It's just these extremely dynamic conversations. And they remind me a lot of you and me, Nat, writing this musical because they get angry at each other frequently. One of them has to draw, which is a lot harder, much like you have to make the songs, which is much harder.
I'm glad you acknowledged that publicly.
And the other guy's like, yeah, I'm done already. I'm waiting for you to finish. Jordan, what's something you've been enjoying lately?
I've been loving the comic series I Heart Skull Crusher. This is from Josie Campbell and Alessio Zono. It's such a fun concept. It is like Bad News Bears meets Mad Max, I would say is this meets that. It takes place to post-apocalyptic wasteland. They have in this world, there's a like death sport called Screaming Paintball. And there's kind of just this ragtag group of screaming paintball players who want to win the championship. It's like kind of a road trip story. It's kind of a sports story. There's a little bit of romance. It's so funny. It is so, so funny. I think like the comic we're going to be talking about later, just like the jokes hit really hard. And yeah, gorgeous art. I had not heard of Alessio Zono before, but this is such a cool art style. It's a little bit manga, it's a little bit like 8-bit Nintendo in some places. Ooh. It's just so much fun. I couldn't recommend it more.
Okay, man. I gotta go check that out. I've heard of it, but that's a glowing recommendation. I gotta go pick my copy up.
Comics are crazy, huh?
They are. Comic books can get a little wild sometimes.
And speaking of comic books that are pretty crazy, I mean, we're not going to read it today on the episode, but we have to talk about Youth Group.
Yes.
Just a bit of background before I get you to talk about it. I was also raised in an evangelical Christian background all the way here in Singapore. I too attended a youth group of sorts. I mean, and I know I still identify as a Christian now in many ways. So of course I've gone through my own deconstruction journey, but that's a story for another podcast.
And you also exorcise demons once in a while, don't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just on the side in the cabin in the woods.
You gotta have side hustles these days. You gotta have multiple income streams.
In this economy? Come on.
In this economy? Tell me about it.
So yeah, it was really interesting for me to just sort of see this spin on something that I guess I grew up with in a weird normalized way, but then put it into this context, like stuff we've read on this show. Like, we've read Solo Leveling, which is also about demon slaying, and so like kind of bringing that into this world of Christendom and mega churchness was really interesting for me. I mean, I would love to know sort of where this idea came from.
Sure. I'll give the elevator pitch for it real quick. It is
Yeah.
It is a YA horror comedy about teen exorcists. As you mentioned, there's demons. And it's kind of just in the world of a goofy Bible study. When I was a kid, I had a, goofy youth group that I went to every Sunday, and we sang parody songs and made abstinence charts. And I always just thought it was just a funny, weird little world that you really don't see in media a lot. Or if you see it in media, it's like kind of broad and maybe doesn't like get at all the funny specifics. I'd always just kind of wanted to write about one. I would always just thought to myself, like, this was a funny experience. You could probably write about it with some authenticity. And then I kind of had the idea to inject a little religious horror in there. Obviously, there's like a lot of religious horror, but it is very rarely funny. So there's a lot of like serious stuff and gory stuff, over the top stuff, but I had never seen a religious horror comedy before. And I love horror comedies. I love Buffy. I love Shaun of the Dead. All that stuff is so much fun. That's kind of the like soup of stuff that I was thinking about when I came up with the pitch. The art in this book is done by the great, great, great artist, Bowen McCurdy, who I think really drew the hell out of it. Bowen does such great demons and such expressive, funny characters, and was just like a joy to work with. I think could not have drawn this book better. And it's out now wherever you buy your books.
Exactly.
It's terrific. I think that specificity is part of the reason why it's so enjoyable to read. You talk about it coming from your own personal experience, but it does read as very true despite it being surreal and magical. Like the emotional thing, especially, I was really moved by the character's journey with their parents, with the protagonist's journey with parents. We're not going to spoil anything on this show, but I just thought that was a very like emotional subplot underneath this kind of wacky story.
Thanks. I definitely went back to my teen years in my head when I was writing it and wrote about a lot of the feelings I was having at the time. I think the families in the book are going through some similar stuff that my family went through. So it is a very crazy book with demon fighting and jokes and magical weapons and superpowers, but kind of a weirdly personal story. So it's interesting for me to read it back, reading all the like personal details I put in there and then just the wild, crazy comic book shit. It was fun. I really like that it is at once like kind of a specific personal story and also something fun and genre and funny.
I don't want to get us too lost in the weeds before we get into what we're reading today, but I do have another question for you, Jordan.
Sure, please.
I feel like maybe it's because I've been reading a lot of manga lately, but it felt like there was a pretty big manga influence, especially with how Bowen McCurdy was structuring the pages.
Yeah.
Right, like the panel layouts and all that, a lot of beats of silence, a lot of straight angles. The pages had a lot of panels. And I was wondering, was that something you were making a conscious choice on? Was that something that McCurdy was bringing to the table?
Yeah, I'm going to say that's all Bowen. Bowen, I think, is a big manga and anime fan. I'm not really. I watch a little bit of anime here and there, but it's not part of my regular media diet. Any anime influencer, manga influencer seeing in there, I'm going to go ahead and say that's all Bowen. And yeah, there's definitely some wonderful art stuff in here that I just could never have conceived of. I think Bowen is also very into color theory, colors and the emotions that they're associated with. So we were doing an interview together and Bowen just mentioned, oh yeah, I used a lot of color theory in this book. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. That was like not in my script anywhere. So that was just a fun way that Bowen put their personal stamp on it. When you have the relationship that we do in that we're a writer and an artist who were paired up. As a writer, it's really fun when someone gets something that was in your head, but it's really fun when they do something that wasn't in your head. Just something totally new, something that's totally surprising. There's a scene a little bit later in the book that I did not write with any spiciness in mind, but the way that Bowen drew it in such a way that it's like kind of spicy. There's just some looks and there's some postures. And then we're like, oh, there's a little bit of like tension in this scene that I did not write in there intentionally, but Bowen brought it out.
A big theme of the show is about the spirit of collaboration, comics being made by many people working together in tandem, uplifting each other. So it's really great to hear that. I want to get into that more. We will come back to it, but we do want to get to what we're reading today. Jordan, could you tell us what we're reading today?
Yeah, this is a book from last year, I believe, that I really loved. This is X-Terminators. This is an X-Men book by Leah Williams and Carlos Gómez on the art. And I don't know how caught up in X-Men continuity y'all are or how into it you got. This is during the Krakoa stuff that was going on last year. This is kind of the Jonathan Hickman penned mega event that brought the X-Men together on this secret island. It's over now. They're not doing it anymore. But this was a story in that world. I don't super keep up with the X-Men these days. I kind of pick and choose titles, and I'll pick something up if there's a cool creative team, or I'll pick something up if I've heard of it. God, I really love the Marauders. That was a great little X-Men title from Jerry Duggan was writing that for a while. Very, very good. And the Hickman stuff. And Jonathan Hickman is so awesome, and all the like House of X stuff that he did was great. But I didn't really follow a ton of these X-Men comics. And I picked this one up because I ran into, I don't think he edits the X-Men anymore, but at the time he was the X-Men editor, Jordan D. White. I think he does some other stuff at Marvel now. Maybe he got bumped into another bracket of books. We wish him well, a wonderful man. Anyway, I bumped into him at a con and kind of fanned out a little bit and talked about how much I was like enjoying some stuff he worked on and what a Marvel fan that I am. And I just kind of asked him what he was excited about, what he worked on that he was stoked on. And he mentioned this book, X-Terminators. And I know this is like a title that they go back to in X-Men. I vaguely remember it from the 90s. I was a kind of 90s comics kid, so I read a ton of X-Men. And he said we had a cool creative team on it, and we went a little harder into comedy, and he was just stoked on it in a way that made me think, oh, I got to get this thing. So I ordered it up from the old Comics Factory in Pasadena, California. A great place to shop for comics. Comics Factory for all your comic book needs. I just loved it. It's so funny, and it's just such a blast. It has stuff to do with the like overarching Krakoa continuity, but not much. It's not super bogged down with setting up some mega event. And if it was, I didn't notice it. When you read monthly comics, sometimes there's that feeling of like, okay, they're setting up Secret Wars. All right, they got a thing this summer that they got to do. And it was just this really fun, like, standalone story. The general premise is that it is Dazzler, Jubilee, and Boom Boom. Dazzler breaks up with her boyfriend, finds him cheating, throws out all his stuff, throws out his vinyl collection. And her and the other two, I know, right? It's
not the vinyl collection.
I know. This dude's pained reaction when Dazzler smashes all his vinyl is so funny. They just like go out drinking. They go out drinking, and then they find that someone put something in their drinks, and it was the ex-boyfriend, and he's a vampire. So they get transported to this crazy arena fighting battle world. There's all these challenges they have to do. They f shit up, and they have to fight these vampires. And it is just funny on every page. The art looks gorgeous. It's just such fun, vibrant X-Mening. I love that it's like a Big Two title, Big Two being Marvel and DC. I love that it's a Big Two title that is just really concerned with being funny. I don't think you see that too much in Big Two comics. Spider-Man says funny stuff. Deadpool says funny stuff. There are jokes in Big Two comics, but this one is just like, we want every page to be funny. And it is, and it totally is. Like, Leah Williams is a very funny, great writer who I did not know anything about until this. And now I've followed her to some other titles.
Did you read her X Factor?
No, how is it? Is it good?
It's great. I think it preceded this X-Terminator run. So I have read that one, but
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's great. It's basically Krakoa's private investigation team.
Oh, really? That's cool. That's a fun premise. The X Factor books have always been like so much fun. So I'm sure that seems like a good match to me. It was just such a fun way to discover like a new writer and a tone that I want more of in mainstream comics.
Very exciting, Jordan. I'm looking forward to reading it. But before we do that, I have to poke Nat a little bit and bother him. Nat, what do you know about the X-Men?
Well,
name me 3 X-Men and I'll leave you.
Well,
alone.
I can do that.
Okay.
Wolverine.
Okay.
Cyclops.
Yep.
Storm. I'll give you 4.
Good job.
Oh wait, I just dug a hole for myself. Let me.
Do 4. Do a 4th one. You said you could do 4.
Maybe a certain fourth wall breaking merc with a mouth who's very popular these days.
Wait, is Deadpool part of the X-Men?
Yeah, Deadpool's an X-Men.
Oh, well, there you go. Thank you, Jordan, setting me
No
up there.
problem. Happy to help.
You know, just in case it wasn't clear, Jordan, you know, the stanceness of who I am, it's very authentic. You know, it's not a persona.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
We
put on
can't
a show.
manufacture how little Nat knows.
I get this.
Yeah. I don't secretly pretend to not know comics and then read it on the side, you know. So it's part of my branding to not know these things.
And what's exciting, Jordan, is that this is probably going to be the most modern Big Two comic Nat's ever read.
Oh, yeah? Oh, interesting.
By and far, because we haven't read much superhero stuff. We've read Daredevil twice.
Okay.
And we've read Watchmen. And that's actually almost all the superhero stuff we've done on the show.
Okay, all right. I think this is a great comic for a I kind of know who the X-Men are reader. I've definitely recommended it to some people who are like, oh yeah, I know the X-Men, but I just want like a fun comic book. Yeah, again, I think it's light on the continuity gunk. And obviously these mutants are a little bit of, deeper cuts, Jubilee being maybe the most famous. But I think if you just Google who they are and what their powers are, you can follow this thing. I definitely recommend this to people who are super into Marvel and just people who want to read a fun comic. So yeah, I think this is good for this exercise.
Side note before we get into this, speaking of deep cut X-Men, didn't Marvel just announce some Singaporean X-Men person, Yan?
Yes, they did. They did just announce in a new team there's going to be the first Singaporean character in the Marvel, pretty much Marvel completely.
What is their name? Do you remember?
I can't remember their name, but their ability is to be basically hyper efficient.
Hyper focused, right? Like they can focus and learn any ability for 1 minute, which is so funny.
Which is very Singaporean.
It's so Singaporean. We work too much. But yeah, there you go. There's a little shout out to Singapore right there.
So for our listeners, we are currently teeing up X-Terminators by Leah Williams and Carlos Gómez. Nat and I are actually going to be reading it from the Kindle app separately, which is where you can get this if you like. I'm going to be reading it off of Comixology, I think. But of course, you can also go get it at your local comic book stores. It's pretty new, so you should be able to find it pretty easily. Anything else before we cut to this reading?
Yeah, no, I think just have fun with it. I think if you feel like you're wondering who are these characters, I think just a little trip into Wikipedia just kind of gives you their power set and a little bit of history. The continuity thing to know is that at this point in X-Men, there is an island filled with mutants somewhere, and they all live on that island.
We'll be right back. Okay, and we are back having freshly read X-Terminators issue 1 by Leah Williams and Carlos Gómez. I'm really excited to talk about this. There's a lot to talk about, even though it's just one issue. But before that, we have to let people know as quickly as possible what that issue is about.
I think if I'm right about what comes next, y'all are going to describe what you read in 5 words.
That is correct. And what we've done when both of us are on the Sans half is we've alternated words. So you go first, Yan, so you have 3.
I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Extravaganza.
Blood. A lot of blood.
Is that all hyphenated again?
Yes, all hyphenated once again.
Okay, I hate it when you do this. Raunchy? I'm going to go with raunchy.
My second word, I'm going to go with action.
Pretty bland word, Nat.
Thank you. Thank you for your judgment.
There's a lot of action in the book. I don't think you're wrong.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Jordan.
All right.
It's good. Trying to be descriptive.
Playful, I think is what I'm going to go with. And I think it's playful, both in the characters, but in also the comic itself.
Well, I'm going to throw in a 6th word, which is a word that we brought up at the first half of this episode, which is crazy. I mean, Jordan, you talked about this being a crazy comic with a capital C. Well, I'm going to say it's with a capital C. This is one of the craziest comics we've read so far. Just in terms of how much happens in one issue, where it starts at point A and then where it ends at point B, I'm like, whoa. How did we get here so quickly?
Moves, not a wasted panel. You're not getting a bunch of boring exposition. You're just getting right. You're getting right to the vampires. You're getting right to the battle planet. Do the monster trucks happen in the first issue?
Yes.
They do. There's monster trucks
there's
in the
a
first
lot
issue.
going on.
Let's get into a little bit of the summary, just to catch people up. Basically, what happens, as Jordan has touched on this a bit in the first half, one of the characters, Dazzler, broke up with her boyfriend, is upset, organizes a little girls' night out with Jubilee and Boom Boom. They go to a karaoke bar. I love those. It's pretty empty. It's one of those, it's a dingy little place. They start singing some songs. They take some shots. Turns out the shots are drugged. Dazzler's ex-boyfriend, Alex, comes back. Turns out he's a vampire. Surprise. They're drugged. And here's where the big cut happens, right? They're drugged. And then we cut to...
Yeah, the first little scene we get is Boom Boom, and she's on a raft getting attacked by all these creatures from the Black Lagoon type fish monsters.
No context of where she is. Why is the water green? What is this thing in the water? She fights a couple of these things. And we cut again to Jubilee in a monster truck, which, again, no context. Where did this truck come from? Is it diesel or gas? No one knows.
That's the question everybody was asking, I think.
And then she is charged down by more monster trucks. And then we cut to Dazzler surrounded by green, what would you call them?
They almost look like goblins, but they're related to vampires, we can assume.
Kind of orc-like. Yeah.
Alternating between these three scenes, we learned that they're just sort of been transported into this battleground. They kind of find their way to each other, and then they defeat the monsters. And then it's announced at the end that they've passed the first round or something like that. Is that what it says?
Yes, yeah.
And then we see female Wolverine.
That's just Wolverine.
X-23.
I would love to know who this person is. That's in one issue.
It's a really, really wacky issue. And what it reminds me of the most is probably like arcade stories, like the X-Men arcade stories. So Nat, I'm not describing video games. I'm describing an X-Men villain whose whole thing is he transports them into these sort of fun house of horrors.
Oh, okay.
And makes them play games to compete for him. Actually, there's several villains that do that. There's
Mojo.
also Mojo.
Mojo does a lot of that. Yeah. Listen, you gotta if you've been around since the 60s, you're gonna repeat some stuff.
But moreover, it's just a reminder. Oh yeah, it's actually fun to see these characters do crazy things, and that's why it keeps happening to them. Especially these three, right? Because Jordan, you mentioned this a little bit before, but Jubilee is maybe the most well-known of these characters, and that's primarily because of the cartoon.
Yeah, the X-Men cartoon, Jubilee was the audience surrogate character in that. She was the new X-Man learning about her powers for the first time. So she represented the viewer who was learning about this world of mutants and the Xavier School. She was always just such a fun, energetic teen character, cool powers, cool outfit. Yeah, Jubilee rules. I've always been a Jubilee fan.
I have a question, and this is probably belying my ignorance and also probably my very poor observation skills. What are their powers? It wasn't super clear to me. I got a rough sense. Don't make me guess, Yan. I'm going to embarrass myself. Can you guys explain to me clearly what each of their powers are?
Sure, yeah. I think a little later in the book, if you keep reading, there's some sort of printout dossier where you're getting everybody's powers. So that might happen a little bit later in the book.
Okay.
But yeah, Jubilee has firecracker light powers. They're all a little bit similar in this. And maybe that kind of adds to the theme of friendship and sticking together, but their powers are a little bit samey. I'll say this team. Boom Boom just throws energy bombs, time bombs, and Dazzler converts sound into light, sound into energy. So the louder the sound, the bigger her attack is. So
okay.
Yeah. A lot
that
of
explains
energy blast based powers, which there are a lot of in X-Men period.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which is why she throws that baby in the air
I was gonna say,
to get a loud cry from it. On top of it being similar because of friendship, it's also, this is what I'm saying about the comic being playful in its creation, is that it's a team of three characters who are all light-based powers fighting vampires who famously don't like the light. It's really the perfect three characters to enter this story. Also, as with Jubilee, because she's this character that so many people grew up with, I feel like she's kind of become the one that's figuring it out, the young adult of the team. I just like that first page, the first time Jubilee calls. And Allison goes, Jubilee, what are you doing right now? Because she's mad about her ex-boyfriend. And Jubilee replies, my best, Allison. Okay? My bleep best. And I just thought that was such a funny moment. That's it's a little bit of dramatic irony because we know that Dazzler's mad about the boyfriend, but we get why Jubilee thinks she's screaming at her. Just little bits of comedy. Like Jordan was saying, there's comedy in every page of this comic.
Yeah. I was very amused that Alex, the ex-boyfriend, said the exact same words I said. No, not the vinyl. So, I really resonated with that.
He's vinyl dudes are they serious about the vinyl?
Yes. I have a vinyl set up in my living room instead of a TV, so that says a lot about me. There is actually now a word that's coming to mind that's way better for the 5-word summary than what I said just now, but I didn't want to bring it up, which is, I feel, especially once we get transported to this battleground arena world, this book is so maximalist. I feel it's one of the most maximalist.
That's a wonderful way to describe it. It is. It's the most.
Yeah, I feel like scenes where there could have been 5 orcs or 5 demons, there's 20. It's just how many more can we fit into this panel? It's a lot.
I think that's a good observation about it. And I think that it's such a good marriage of writer and artist because I think the writer is going very big. A lot of jokes, crazy premises, crazy monsters. And then the artist is just piling on. And yeah, you're right. It's not just one monster. It's a whole mob of them. It's not just one monster truck. It's a whole demolition derby. Yeah, it is just so much fun. And you do not know what is going to happen on the next page. And it's always, I don't know, it's such a blast.
It really has me wishing I was reading the physical version of this, because something we often talk about is the page turn effect and just the sheer shock. And I'm imagining the shock of reading this physically and turning the page right before they get transported and being like, wait, whoa, okay, we're somewhere completely else. And then turning the page and then, oh my gosh, now it's Jubilee. Oh my gosh, now it's Dazzler. It just feels like there's this very frenetic, kinetic energy that keeps propelling the book forward.
Something that we often talk about on this show is stuff that happens outside the panels, which is things like chapter markers. And even, in our last episode with Beth Hedlund, we talked a lot about even like physical book design and how comic book creators imbue sort of meaning and a lot of thought into these decisions. I was really tickled by the chapter pages in this. I mean, we only saw 1 and 2, but 1 has a little, on top of the number 1, it has this text that says, "This book is gleefully transgressive." So it's very self-referential. And then when you go to the second one, where we ended, it says, "This book is gleefully stupid," which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think they're doing a couple of things there. I think that the era of comics that this is from, the recent era, like the big kind of mastermind behind all these comics was Jonathan Hickman, a great writer who I'm sure you will read at some point in the future on this podcast. He always has a lot of like charts and graphs and prose in his books. He is a very like maximalist writer. He's often very funny, but he's not super jokey. But it's very like big ideas, big continuity, big swing, big world building type stuff. And yeah, and a lot of that is like he has this very particular style where like he'll include some prose, again, a lot of charts. And I think that they're doing their version of it because I think they want all these comics to kind of look the same. So I think these kind of recurring moments, this book is blank, this book is stupid, this book is transgressive, and the kind of warnings before each chapter, you get a like warning, this book contains, partial nudity, jokes about Dazzler's ass, blood, gore, guts. And I think they're saying like, we are part of this bigger X-Men continuity, but we are doing this our own way. Like this is our spin on the formula. So yeah, I really like that. Comics fans can sometimes get bent out of shape when it seems like something is not being taken seriously. And maybe that's a part of the reason why you don't see more like funny, humor-focused comics in the big two, is just that like people like the stuff to be taken seriously. And so, yeah, I think kind of like adding these warnings and adding these little like expectation setters at the beginning of issues maybe help them to let people know that this is not Logan. This is something else. So enjoy the jokes. But yeah.
Just to give a little bit more context for you, Nat, on where this sits within the X-Men. So John has already talked about House of X, the Krakoa age. This is maybe one of the most, I would say one of the most self-serious / mythologizing eras of X-Men comics. So there's 10 other titles running at this time, and each of them have very sort of serious takes. So Marauders was the pirate ship that's roaming around and dealing with the international commerce. That's exactly why X-Terminators feels so refreshing, is because it's being playful, it's being gleeful in this setting that's otherwise very serious. It's very much a comedy book in a label that is not comedy-centric right now. What I really enjoy about it is that really superhero isn't really a genre, right? Superhero is a type of thing. Superhero is a type of character. The type of genre this story is, it's a comedy. A lot of things can exist within the superhero / X-Men genre.
Yeah, definitely. And you do need that comedy to reset things every now and then. I think it's a part of the reason why everybody loves this Deadpool movie so much. It's a funny movie that is coming after a bunch of movies and shows where things are pretty serious. And yeah, and I think that stuff can be great. Obviously, you read Watchmen. Watchmen's great. Watchmen's super serious. And The Dark Knight is great. And the Christian Bale Batman movies are great. But sometimes you just kind of want to yuck it up. And I don't know if this is considered a classic or a huge success or a disappointment or whatever, but just for me, after reading those big Hickman X-Men comics, which are legitimately brilliant, it was just kind of fun to go on this weirdo, wacko little adventure where I laughed on every page.
Nat, I think the last funny comic we read was Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. Have you read that, Jordan?
Terrific book, yeah. I read the monthly comics and I bought the anthology they put out of the whole thing. So yeah, I think I tapped out at a certain point, not because I wasn't enjoying it. I was really enjoying it, but just because I fell behind on the issues. That's a brilliant classic book that I think is a great modern comic. I don't know how they stick the landing. Again, I haven't finished it, so maybe it all falls apart in the last act. But I doubt it. Not with those two guys. They're the best.
I also didn't finish it, actually, similarly. I loved so much of it, and then I think the release schedule got a little uneven, so I couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah, it's always a little tough.
Do you think there's any similarities in how this book is playing with comedy in the same way that Sex Criminals does?
Oh, I feel like I'm being put on the spot here. I mean, I think definitely a little bit of this of the self-referential things with the chapter markers. Talking about what this book you're about to read is going to be. I think Sex Criminals does that a lot, where you hear like sort of the writer's voice in that way. I think definitely a lot of like the non sequitur sort of page turn jump cuts, quote unquote, I think is a device that is quite well used here. It's different in terms of, Sex Criminals. Well, at least the issues that we read, there wasn't much action or fighting or blood or gore per se. So I think that's where they diverge. But I can see a lot of the same comedic devices being employed.
There's two things actually I would like to bring up in relation to that. One of my favorite moments is just these little caption boxes at the start, top left of the pages, right? Of saying, meanwhile, elsewhere, right? When Boom Boom wakes up, it's after. And then when it's Jubilee, it goes meanwhile. And then when it goes to Dazzler, it goes meanwhile still. And it's kind of guessing the reader already being like, wait, what? We're still going? We're still going? And then later it does it again. It hits us with elsewhere. And then 2 pages later, elsewhere still. One of the other comedic elements that I found funny about this is how this comic plays with expletives, right? These big black bars of bleeps. It's not just replacing it with the, what's the word for it? There's a word for those.
Yeah, wingdings or something like that. Yeah, when they swear in this book, it is like when a cartoon character swears, you see that kind of mishmash of exclamation point, $, $sign.
Growlix. I'm sorry, I had to go look it up.
Go.
It's called Growlix. It's a very strange word, Grawlix. But it's not just typical Growlix. It gives it this black bar that extends and very often breaks the bubble, right? And that gives the comic a sense of volume. It's not just big text. It's like, it's literally breaking out of the bubble because it's so loud. That's how loudly Jubilee is yelling whatever she's yelling at the top of her lungs while she's being chased by vampires in this monster truck.
I always love it when comics do that, when they break the panel or, something happens off panel. In the first graphic novel I did, Bubble, I did that with a great artist named Tony Cliff and another great writer named Sarah Morgan. Tony put in this scene where there's a character on drugs. And this is an example of me not putting this in the script, but it being like a Tony invention. So this character goes on this drug trip, and to read that page, you have to like turn the book. You have to like flip the book all the way around. I'm guessing that pissed off people who were reading it digitally, if the screen corrects however you turn it. But just as far as a like fun weirdo thing I never had seen in a comic before, I was just like, this is so cool. And I love it every time comics artists do that, because chances are, unless you are Nat, who is being dragged onto this podcast by his comics loving friend, if you read comics, you probably read comics. So those little moments of like messing with the form are so fun. And hopefully that, comics occasionals aren't too thrown by them, but I always love them.
I'm so glad you brought that moment up, Jordan, because I was reading Bubble digitally. And that was one of my favorite moments, was trying to spin and rotate my phone against it. But it's a very evocative way of getting into that character's head in that moment. We're all about what are the tools and tricks that the writer and artist have at their disposal to immerse the reader in a way
that
they don't
only
expect.
Comics can do. It's the big thing of this show as well, that other mediums probably can't. And I'm beginning to appreciate it more and more. I want to bring things back to youth group, Jordan.
Oh, sure.
Because there was a particular demon, and it's probably just coincidence, but I say demon. I mean, I don't think it's a demon in X-Terminators, but the monsters that Jubilee is fighting on the raft.
Yeah.
The one that bursts out the water. And it reminded me a lot of the demon in youth group, the big red guy. I forget his name. What's his name? Starts with S?
Surgot. We're talking about Surgot.
Yes, the very first guy. I won't spoil it, but the very first one that takes that form. I'm curious for you, because you talked a bit about this collaboration between yourself and your artist. How much were you informing the design of these demons? Or were you just leaving it up to them entirely?
When you're working with the artist, I think there's a lot of different styles. Some writers, I should say, are like very meticulous and describe a lot of different stuff, and some kind of leave it up to the artist. And I think I like have a little bit of a like let them cook approach to it. I know that's like an old
Yeah.
meme, but I think it like works for this. They're a brilliant genius, so let them do their thing and not give them a ton of directions that they have to follow or you'll be pissed off. So yeah, I think I sent Bowen a couple of, here are some monsters that I like. And I think I was playing one of those Doom games at the time, one of those rebooted Doom games.
Doom
that have come
Eternal.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those, that has some monster design. Let me tell you, the monsters in Doom, oof, they're good. So I think I sent Bowen some of those. I think with Tony on Bubble, I was playing Bloodborne. It's always like what video game I'm playing. I'm like, here's some monsters I like. Do you like this monster? So yeah, I sent some stuff, but also made sure to just say, or whatever you think looks cool. I think Bowen maybe took a little bit of inspiration from the like stuff that I sent along, but I think a lot of it is from Bowen's brain too.
On that specific note of what you sent to Bowen, Jordan, I'm really curious about what your scripts look like, if you don't mind sharing that. Like, are you break it down panel by panel? Are you break it down page by page? Are you doing it the Marvel way?
Sure, yeah. So with comic scripts, there's not like an industry agreed upon format. I think some companies have a way they like to do it. I've done a little bit of writing for Archie, and Archie has a specific way they would like you to do your scripts. But with an OGN, an original graphic novel, people do it so many different ways. If you just Google famous comic book scripts, there's some websites that have them, and they all look different. I think the advice that I got, I read a really great book before starting writing comics. It's called Words for Pictures by Brian Michael Bendis. A terrific book. I think if you like comics or are thinking about writing them, it's the best. His advice in it is like, ask the artist what they want. Ask the artist, what is the easiest way for you to work? And Bowen said, just give me a screenplay. So I just did like a screenplay with some chattier stage directions and links and stuff like that. And some stuff that was like a little more like conversational that was just kind of between us that you wouldn't do on a screenplay. It was like, well, I'm thinking like this, but also if you want to do something in this zone, like I think we need to see this. There's a pool house later. So like maybe let's see the pool house in this thing, but we can see it in another panel if you want to. So there's stuff like that in it. But yeah, I think the thing it looks closest to is a screenplay.
That's very cool. Fun fact, the only writer we've read twice on the show is Brian Michael Bendis, the writer of Words for Pictures.
As you continue this show, you'll probably read a lot of Bendis. He's the best.
I think one of my favorite bits in Words for Pictures is when he's talking about writing Avengers, and he went, I think, to Greg Land or Frank Cho, I think it was, and was like, what do you want to draw? And he was like, oh, dinosaurs. And Bendis was like, okay, we'll send them to the Savage Land so they can see some dinosaurs and you get to draw your dinosaurs.
Yeah, I like that philosophy a lot. I think the amount of work an artist puts into a book versus the amount of work a writer puts in, it's 5-1. The artist spends so much time on this and the writer does not, relatively. You'll get the best stuff if it's fun, if it's stuff they like to draw, if it's not stuff they don't like to draw. Like if they don't want to do crowd scenes, don't put in a bunch of crowd scenes, you know? I mean, obviously, like Bendis books are so great. He gets such great results, so you might as well like listen to the guy. Probably a big part of that is just respects the artist, is fun to work with, it writes a script that the artist wants to draw. Guys got some advice. Fellas, will you keep reading X-Terminators from Marvel Comics?
Yeah, I think I am definitely going to keep reading. I really, really enjoyed this. As someone who's was reading X-Men, was pretty caught up, and then fell off a little bit because the current continuity got a little too heavy for me to keep up with. This is kind of the perfect re-entry for me back into the X-Men comics. I love Leah Williams' style. I think Carlos Gómez is doing a crazy job. And I want to know what Laura Kinney is doing here. I want to know what X-23, the Wolverine, how she's involved in this story. And I did flip a little bit ahead, so I did see the Hellfire Council. So I'm really excited to keep reading this.
Yeah, I probably will keep reading as well. I think you were correct when you said that this is a really good entry point for someone who carries the label, I know a little bit about the X-Men.
Yeah.
That is me, basically. And I think you're right in that, a lot of the continuity, gunk was the word you use, isn't in there.
Yeah.
It's a really easy standalone read. And I too want to know what female Wolverine is doing there. I don't know anything about her, but she seems cool, and she's wearing that cool yellow suit that we all come to know and love. So yeah, I'm definitely going to read at least one issue more, I'll say.
Yeah, Nat, and talking about continuity, I think something that's really funny that gets glazed over in this comic is that Jubilee was a vampire for a solid chunk of time.
Oh, what?
Yeah, Jubilee was a vampire and then had a baby vampire.
Yeah, that's some X-Men stuff that I missed, but I feel like I hear the characters allude to sometimes. Yeah, Jubilee has a baby. It might be a vampire. Yeah, again, sometimes you got to read these things with Wikipedia open, but or just not care, or just say, well, that's probably something else that happened in an earlier issue.
Well, Jordan, we typically end the show with some recommendations. We like to call it the Comic Sans pipeline. How this basically works is we start by saying something that if you like X, where X is typically not a comic, like if you like this song or you like this movie or you like this TV show, you would like X-Terminators.
Okay.
So we start with that, and then later on we'll say, and then if you go on to read X-Terminators and you like X-Terminators, here is another comic that you might like. So that's sort of the pipeline, bringing people in from the outside the comic world into X-Terminators and then further into the comic world. So what would you think is something that, for someone who doesn't know anything about X-Terminators or comics, what would be a good comparison?
I think it has a lot in common with crazy Adult Swim style adult animation. I think that if Marvel wanted to do like an Adult Swim show, this would be kind of perfect for it. It's got a little bit of the Rick and Morty sense of humor.
Yeah.
If you watch the Harley Quinn show on HBO Max, which I do, I think it has a lot of the same, vibe and DNA as that show, which I like a lot. So if you like a little comedy violence, if you like people joking while they're in danger, Evil Dead might be a good parallel.
That's a great comparison. Yeah.
Over the top gore factory. All those things would be great if you wanted to get into X-Terminators. And if you like X-Terminators...
Oh, he's going for the full pipeline.
Actually, I'll maybe circle back to what I talked about at the top of the show. I think if you're into X-Terminators, the book I mentioned at the top, I Heart Skull Crusher, is a great companion read to this one. It's not quite as gory. It's a little more PG-13. If this is the hard R, then I Heart Skull Crusher is maybe like a spicy PG-13. But yeah, it's got a great joke per page ratio. It's got fun action. It's got really over-the-top art. Maximalist, as you put it. That's a good way to describe both these things. So yeah, check out I Heart Skull Crusher if you were into X-Terminators.
Nice. Yeah, and do you have anything to add to the pipeline, either before or after?
Yeah. I'll take a stab at a before and after. Actually, I'm feeling brave. The Adult Swim shows is such a great comparison, so it kind of knocks mine out of the water. But I was going to say Bridesmaids. Any of that era of sort of R-rated, female-driven comedy movie. I think because you can tell there's going to be an underlying thing about friendship, and there's also going to be a lot of wacky things on the wayside. In terms of if you like Exterminators, I suggest you go on to read Bubble by our guest, Jordan Morris. And Sarah Morgan and Tony Cliff. I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of, I thought Bubble was a really, really funny book, and I thought the action in it, like in this, was really clean and exciting to read. I was really propelled my whole way through Bubble as I was through Exterminators because the characters were engaging, the comedy was fun, and the action made me want to know what's going to happen next.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Tony Cliff. Tony Cliff can draw an action scene. Boy, howdy. If Youth Group is a YA book, Bubble is definitely a harder R. So, yeah, for fans of X-Terminators.
Nice. And I'm going to wrap things up. My before is going to be very bland. I'm just going to say, we talked about it. I think if you like Deadpool movies in general, I guess he is part of the... I've learned today he is part of the X-Men lore. But yeah, I think the recent Deadpool Wolverine movie, very topical. So I'd say that definitely has some similar threads. And of course, I'm going to end my pipeline with, if you enjoyed Exterminators, I do think you would enjoy Youth Group. Jordan's latest
the
book.
double plug.
Thank you.
The famous
Love it.
double
More
plug.
plugs. More.
Double
Make it a triple plug. More plugs.
And
People
Good Mythical
wanna be
Morning.
hounded to buy something.
Similar to what Jordan was saying about his recommendation, obviously Youth Group, it's not as R-rated. There isn't as much gore and blood, and maybe not as maximalist, but I think a lot of the elements, of course, the comedy Jordan's writing is so funny. It's there from page 1 all the way to the end, as well as, as you had alluded to, the more heartfelt subplots. And of course, there's, a lot of kicking monsters' butts.
There you go.
Who doesn't love that? And also, interestingly, a lot of also like light-related fighting. Right? Kind of.
Okay, yeah. We're finding connections all over the place. Absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah.
That is my recommendation. Bubble, Youth Group, check them out.
Thank you.
Jordan, Is there anything else that you like to plug that we have not plugged already before we end today's?
We got in the double plug to plug even further would be tacky. No, Youth Group and Bubble, both, you can find them anywhere you get your books and digitally as well, even though you might have a little bit of a tough time with that rotating page in Bubble. The rest should be fun and easy to read.
Thank you, Jordan, so much for coming on Comic Sans.
Thanks again, Jordan. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Comic Sans. We'll see you on the next page.
See ya. Thanks for listening to Comic Sans. This is an Andaz Productions podcast hosted by Myle and Nathaniel Ma and produced by Scott Lee Chua and Roshan Singh Sambhi. This episode was audio edited by Maddy Searle, video edited by Kit Ling Leong, and transcribed by Danielle Anne Espinosa. Our cover art is by Isabel Fang, and our motion graphic animations by Kanikni Studio Maryana Rudakova. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review Comic Sans. And while you're at it, follow us on social media at Comic Sans Pod. Links are in the description below.